Michael Crow stared out the window. The plane was descending over Chicago, the city lights peeking through the clouds. The flight from Seattle had lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes, but to Michael it felt like he'd been in the air all day. He rubbed his temples, feeling the fatigue tightening around his head. He'd been working nonstop for the past 3 weeks, preparing a paper on cybersecurity for a conference in Portland. Now that the presentation was over, all he wanted was quiet. "Drinks, sir?" the flight attendant asked, stopping at his row. "No, thank you," Michael replied, not looking away from the window. The guy in the seat next to him, in his mid-20s, was dozing, his head on the tray. Michael had his headphones in his lap. He'd turned up the music early in the flight, but quickly turned it off. Even his favorite rock didn't help. I shouldn't have said yes, he thought, looking at the flashing lights below. But Tom, his college friend, wasn't one to be turned down. 50 years, man, you have to be, he'd said on the phone 3 weeks ago. Michael sighed. Their friendship, which began during their freshman year at the University of Washington, had survived the years and the distance. Tom stayed in Chicago, got married, and had 2 children. Michael went to Seattle, where his life revolved around work and flying. "Please fasten your seat belts," the pilot's voice said. "We're about to land." Michael took out his phone and reread the message from Tom. "When I land, right. I sent you the address." "We're waiting," he replied. "I'll be there soon," and put the phone in his jacket pocket. There was a noise in the cabin. People were getting bags. Someone was trying to open the overhead compartment. Michael sat motionless, looking at the city. O'Hare Airport greeted him with a buzz of voices and the smell of coffee from the nearby counter. Baggage claim was crowded. Someone was shouting into a phone. A baby was bawling in a stroller. Michael made his way to the car rental counter, dragging a suitcase on wheels behind him. His black bag, containing his laptop and a couple of books, slapped against his hip. He was used to traveling. Light years of business travel had taught him to get by with the bare minimum. Conferences, seminars, client meetings, his life was on the move, and he rarely stayed in one place for more than a week. "Good evening," said the girl at the rental desk. Her badge read Emma. "Reservation for who?" "Michael Crow," he replied, holding out his driver's license. She started typing on the keyboard. "Here, everything is ready. The sedan, as ordered. The keys are here. Sign the contract." "Thank you," Michael said, signing. "Where's the car?" "Parking C, row 12, Emma replied. "Gray Toyota Camry. Enjoy your drive." "Got it," Michael nodded, taking the keys. He stopped at a coffee stand on his way out. The line was short, a couple of people ahead of him. "What will you have?" asked the barista, a guy with a tattoo on his neck. "Black coffee, medium," Michael said. "With sugar, cream?" the guy asked. "Without anything," Michael replied. $5, the barista said, placing the cup on the counter. Michael paid with his card and took the coffee. The hot plastic cup felt pleasantly warm in his palms. He took a sip and headed to baggage claim. The suitcase appeared on the conveyor belt 10 minutes later. Michael grabbed it and walked to the parking lot. The cold November air hit him in the face. Chicago smelled of wet asphalt and exhaust. He found a gray Toyota in the parking lot, threw the suitcase in the trunk, and got behind the wheel. The GPS showed 42 minutes to Tom's house in the suburbs. Michael turned on the radio, but the traffic news didn't interest him. He turned it off and drove in silence. "Silence is good," he muttered, looking at the road. The road stretched through the city streets, lit by lanterns. Michael watched the buildings, gas stations, and signs pass by. He liked to drive alone. It gave him time to think. In recent years, solitude has become his norm. He had dated since his divorce 15 years earlier, but no one had lasted more than a few months. "It's like you're not there," one woman, Linda, had said about 2 years ago. Michael didn't argue. His life was his laptop, airports, and hotels. He had recently bought an apartment in Seattle, but he rarely visited. The place was almost empty. A couch, a bed, a table. No photos or souvenirs, just a coffee machine and some books on programming. "Maybe I should have taken a vacation," he said to himself, but then shook his head. Vacation. Where to? He was always on the move anyway. He remembered Tom. They had been inseparable in college. Late nights eating pizza, arguing about basketball, playing silly pranks on their roommates. Tom was the loud one, the outspoken one, the center of attention. Michael was the quiet one, the one who listened and analyzed. "You're like a processor, man," Tom said one day, clapping him on the shoulder. "You calculate everything." "And you're like a loudspeaker," Michael replied, and they both burst out laughing. After graduation, Tom stayed in Chicago and Michael moved to Seattle. They called each other, exchanged messages, but rarely saw each other. The last time was 3 years ago, at the wedding of their mutual friend. "I should have come earlier," Michael muttered, looking at the road, "to see each other properly." His thoughts returned to the divorce. Emily. Michael gripped the steering wheel. Not now, he told himself. He had come for the anniversary, not to dwell on the past. But the memories kept coming back. Their first meeting in the cafe, her smile, their dreams of a home and children. And the night she had said, "I need some space." He shook his head, pushing the images away. "Enough," he said out loud. "That was 100 years ago." A billboard flashed by on the side of the road. White letters on a blue background. "Start again." Michael slowed down, looking at the sign. Something pricked inside. "Start again." He chuckled. "Nonsense," he muttered, pressing on the gas. "Everything is fine as it is." His life suited him. Work, travel, freedom. No obligations. He didn't need change. But the thought of the shield wouldn't go away like an annoying signal on the screen. The road entered the suburbs. The houses were bigger, with neat lawns and streetlights. Michael glanced at the GPS. 10 minutes left. He imagined Tom's house big, with a pool, like he had bragged about on the phone. The pool, of course, Michael chuckled. Tom always wanted to live like in the movies. He remembered Tom dreaming of a big house in college. "There's going to be a yard, a barbecue, a bunch of friends," Tom said, sitting on the couch in their dorm room. "What do you want, Crow?" "A quiet place," Michael replied then, "and maybe a dog." "A dog?" Tom laughed. "Really? You'll be the guy who walks the dog and reads code at night." "Maybe," Michael said, smiling. Now, looking at the suburban houses, he thought that Tom had achieved his goal. And his life had been different, but he had no regrets. Or did he? Michael frowned. "Stop it," he told himself. "It's okay." The road turned right, and the houses became even more spacious. Michael looked at the manicured lawns, the children's bicycles on the porches, the lighted windows. The suburbs were quiet, cozy. He slowed down, enjoying the view. For the first time that day, he felt his fatigue recede. Maybe the trip wouldn't be such a bad idea. "Almost there," he muttered, looking at the GPS. "I'll see Tom soon." He imagined Tom greeting him with beer and jokes, like old times. A smile flickered across his face. It was worth the trip. Michael Crow parked outside Tom's house, turned off the engine, and sat for a minute, looking at the lighted windows. The music came through the closed doors of the car, bass notes, and someone laughing. There were about 20 cars parked in the yard, and the lights reflected off their bodies. He took a deep breath, picked up his bag from the back seat, and got out. The cold November air was invigorating, but it didn't help him shake the feeling that parties weren't his thing. "An hour or two and I'll be gone," he told himself, slamming the door. "Michael," came a voice from the porch. Tom was standing there in jeans and a blue shirt, holding a bottle of beer. His face broke into a smile. "Dude, you did it." Michael smiled and walked towards him, slinging his bag over his shoulder. 50 years old, huh?" he said, coming up. "You look 35. "Ha, flatterer," laughed Tom, hugging him and clapping him on the back. "Come on, everyone's buzzing there already. Lisa's cooked enough food for a company of soldiers." "Are the kids there too?" Michael asked, following him down the path to the house. "Yeah, mine and a bunch of other nephews," Tom answered. "Don't be scared, they mostly run around the yard." "Are you here for a long time?" See you tomorrow, Michael said. Flight back in the morning. Really? Tom stopped and looked at him. Dude, you came for one evening? Work, Michael shrugged. Conference in Seattle next week. Still the same workaholic, Tom chuckled, opening the door. Okay, rest today, without a laptop. We'll see, Michael chuckled. They walked into the house. The guests filled the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway. The music was blaring, some pop hits from the 90s. People were chatting, laughing, holding plates of food and glasses. Michael spotted a couple of faces he vaguely recognized from college, but he didn't stop. The crowd was pressing, and he felt out of place. Beer, wine, what will you have? Tom asked, leading him to the bar in the corner of the living room. The refrigerator was stocked with bottles, and on the table were bowls of chips and dips. Beer, Michael said. And where should we look for Lisa? He added. We need to congratulate the hostess. In the kitchen, calling the shots, Tom said, holding out a cold bottle. Let's go find her. And man, relax, okay? You look like you're in a meeting. I'm fine, Michael said, taking a sip. The beer was cold, slightly bitter. They made their way through the crowd to the kitchen. Lisa was standing at the stove, checking something in the oven. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a bun, and she was wearing a blue dress and apron. Lisa, look who's arrived, Tom shouted. She turned around, wiped her hands on her apron, and smiled. Michael, she said, hugging him. It's good to see you. How was your flight? Fine, he replied. Thank you for the invitation. The house is gorgeous. It was Tom, Lisa said, nodding at her husband. He wanted a pool, I wanted a library. Guess who won? The pool, Michael chuckled. Exactly, she laughed. The food is on the terrace, take whatever you want. And don't hide in the corner, okay? I'll try, Michael said. He always says that, Tom winked. And then he sits off to the side with his laptop. Not today, Michael said, raising the bottle. I promise. I keep my word, said Lisa. Tom, help me with the trays. The guests have already eaten everything. Coming, boss, Tom saluted playfully. Michael, go out into the yard. It's fun there. I'll find you later. Michael nodded and walked out the glass doors onto the terrace. The yard was huge. A blue-lit pool, tables of food, fairy lights overhead. A barbecue was smoking, and the smell of grilling meat mingled with the cold air. Children were running around with rubber rings, and adults were standing in groups, chatting and laughing. The music was louder than in the house, and someone was even dancing on the lawn. Michael paused at the railing of the terrace, looking out over the crowd. All these people, families, couples, friends, felt like they belonged in another world. He sipped his beer and felt like an outsider. His life was single flights, hotels, and work. Here, amid the laughter and conversation, he felt like a guest at the wrong party. Michael Crow, came a voice from the left. He turned around. A man of about 40, in a checkered shirt, was looking at him, squinting. Yes, Michael said, and you? Dan, he replied, holding out his hand. We met at Tom's wedding 100 years ago. Oh, right, Michael nodded, shaking his hand. He vaguely remembered Dan, but pretended to recognize him. What are you doing? Dan asked, taking a sip of beer. Cybersecurity, Michael said. I work in Seattle and travel to conferences. Cool, Dan said. And the family, the kids? Michael tensed, but answered calmly. No, it didn't work out. What about you? 2 boys, Dan said proudly. 7 and 10. My wife is with them by the pool now. So you're a bachelor? Yeah, Michael said briefly. Well, to each his own, Dan nodded. Listen, I'll go find my people. See you. Of course, Michael replied, watching him leave. The conversation left a bad taste in his mouth. Questions about family always hit the same spot. He was used to brushing them off, but it always hurt. 15 years ago, he thought he would have a family. Emily, he squeezed the bottle tighter and took a sip. Not now, he told himself. Hey, Michael, a female voice said. He turned around. Katie, Lisa's friend he'd seen a couple of times at Tom's parties, was approaching him. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, and she was holding a glass of wine. "Hi, Katie," Michael said, forcing a smile. "I didn't expect you here," she said, stopping next to him. "You're always on the go." Tom insisted, he replied. 50 years, you understand. "Oh yeah," Katie laughed. "That's all he's been talking about all month. How are you? Still saving the world from hackers?" "Something like that," Michael said. "What do you do?" "I work at a school. I teach the 4th grade," she said, "and I raised 2 of my own. The eldest is already 15, can you imagine?" "Really?" Michael said, trying to keep the conversation going. "Time flies." "That's not the word," Katie sighed. "And how are you? Wife? Kids?" Michael clenched his jaw, but answered evenly. "No. 1. "Oh, I'm sorry," Katie said, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Michael interrupted. "It's true." "Well, if anything, there are plenty of single women here," she winked, trying to ease the awkwardness. "I can introduce you." "Thanks, I'll pass," Michael chuckled. "Not my thing." Okay, laughed Katie. "I'll go find my husband. He's lost somewhere. See you." "Yeah," Michael nodded. He finished his beer and set the bottle on the railing. The talk of families and children was wearing him down. He looked at the crowd, people laughing, hugging, taking pictures. Children squealed as they jumped into the pool despite the cold. Michael felt the noise pressing down on him. He needed to catch his breath. "Hey, Michael, where have you been?" Tom shouted, appearing on the terrace with a new bottle of beer. "Here," Michael replied, raising his hand. "Just looking around." "Looking around?" Tom chuckled. "You look like you're planning an escape." "Maybe so," Michael chuckled. "It's noisy here." "It's a party, man," Tom said, walking over. "Relax, eat, dance. There are some cute girls over there." "Don't start," Michael said, rolling his eyes. Okay, Tom laughed. "But seriously, there's food on the table. Take whatever you want. And don't disappear. I still want to hear a toast from you." "Toast?" Michael asked. "Are you kidding?" "Not a drop," Tom said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I'm going to check the grill, and you go ahead and join in." "I'll try," Michael replied, but Tom had already gone off to the barbecue. Michael looked at his watch. 8:30. He decided to stay another hour, congratulate Tom, and then head back to the hotel. The crowd was getting louder, and he felt even more of a stranger. He noticed an empty spot by the pool, away from the noise, and headed there to catch his breath. Along the way, he saw a female figure standing by the water, but he couldn't make out her face. Something about her silhouette seemed familiar, but he brushed the thought aside and kept walking. He wanted to leave, but he knew Tom would be offended if he ran away so early. "Another half hour," he said to himself, turning to the water. His gaze fell on a female figure a few meters away. She stood with her back to him, at the edge of the pool, holding a glass of wine. Dark hair pulled back into a low bun, a thin gray sweater, jeans. Something about her posture made him freeze. He squinted, trying to make out her face, but the light was too dim. His heart sank. "It can't be," he thought, but the thought had already taken hold. He knew that silhouette. Emily, his ex-wife. Michael gripped the bottle so tightly his knuckles turned white. 15 years had passed, but he would recognize her anywhere. The way she moved, the way she tilted her head slightly as she held the glass. He looked away, hoping he was wrong. Maybe it's just the same, he told himself. But his insides clenched. Michael set the bottle on the edge of the pool and shoved his hands in his pockets. His mind swirled, dragging him back to their first date, a cafe in Seattle where they sat for 3 hours, talking about music and movies. She laughed at his jokes, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. He was 25 then, she was 24. They had been young, full of plans. He remembered walking along the boardwalk, her arm in his and her words, "You're different." It had been the first time he had thought he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. He shook his head, but the memories wouldn't go away. Their wedding, the small hall, her white dress, her smile as they danced to an old Frank Sinatra song. They dreamed of a house in the suburbs, 2 children, and a dog. "I want a Labrador," Emily would say, sketching plans on a napkin at a restaurant. "And I want you to be happy," he'd say. He'd believe then that she would. Michael clenched his jaw. The good memories always brought pain. That night, when it all fell apart, they were sitting at dinner in their apartment, and Emily, looking down at her plate, said, "I need one last burst of freedom." She'd confessed that she wanted to spend the weekend with Nate, her college ex. "It doesn't mean anything," she added quickly. "I just want closure." Michael was silent, feeling something breaking inside. He didn't yell or argue. He just packed a bag and flew to San Francisco to be with a friend. A week later, he filed for divorce. He looked at the figure by the pool. She was still standing there, not turning around. That wasn't her, he told himself, but he didn't believe his own words. Why would she be here? She hadn't spoken to Tom, as far as he knew. Or had she? Michael frowned. He hadn't asked Tom about Emily since they'd broken up. He hadn't wanted to know. But now, looking at this woman, he couldn't brush it off. "Hey, Michael," a voice said behind him. He turned around. Paul, another college acquaintance, was walking toward him, his bald head glinting under the fairy lights, and he was holding a plate of wings. "Hi, Paul," Michael said, forcing a smile. "Dude, it's been so long," Paul said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Tom said you'd come, but I didn't believe you. You're always on your business trips." "Yes, I got away for the day," Michael replied. "How are you?" "Fine," Paul said, chewing on a wing. "I work in insurance, 2 kids, a wife. Just like everyone else. And you? Still single." Michael clenched his fists in his pockets, but his voice remained level. "Yeah, I work, I travel. Nothing new." "Well, to each his own," Paul said, wiping his hands on a napkin. "Hey, have you seen the grill? Tom grills some meat there. It's mind-blowing. Come on, try it." "Maybe later," Michael said. "I want to stand here." "Okay, whatever," Paul shrugged. "But don't disappear, okay? We need to drink from old times." "Agreed," Michael nodded. Paul left, and Michael looked back at the woman by the pool. She turned slightly to the side, and the light fell on her face. It was Emily. There was no doubt about it. Her features were different, the lines around her eyes, the tired look, but it was her. Michael felt the blood rush to his temples. He wasn't ready. Not here, not now. He remembered their last meeting, a counseling session. Emily had cried, begging him to give her a chance. He had sat silently, staring at the floor. Before that, he had hacked her social media account using an old password. The correspondence with Nate had been a punch in the gut. Secret meetings, lunches, the weekend before their wedding that she had called "Farewell to Youth." She had texted Nate that she sometimes imagined him when she and Michael were together. At the counseling session, he had laid out everything: dates, messages, facts. Emily had tried to justify herself, but he had said, "I can't live with this." And he had left. Michael watched Emily by the pool. She ignored him, looking at the water. He could come over, say something. But what? "Hi, how are you?" That was ridiculous. Or ask why she was there. That wouldn't change anything. He could walk away, pretending he hadn't seen her. But his feet were rooted to the spot. "Michael, where are you stuck?" Lisa's voice rang out. She came out onto the terrace with a tray of snacks. He turned around, trying to look calm. "Here," he said, "just breathing air." "Air?" Lisa laughed, setting the tray down on the table. "You look like you're about to run away. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine," Michael replied. "Just noisy." "I understand," Lisa said. "But hang in there, okay? Tom's so glad you came. He's been talking about you all evening." "Seriously?" Michael asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," she nodded. "Michael this, Michael that. Just like in college. You were inseparable, weren't you?" "That's true," Michael said, smiling. He was always loud. "You're welcome," Lisa laughed. Okay, go get some food. And don't sit there alone, okay? I'll try, Michael replied. Lisa left, and he looked at Emily again. She was still standing by the water, but no, she turned slightly, as if she felt his gaze. Their eyes met. She froze, then nodded briefly, almost imperceptibly. Michael felt his insides tighten. He didn't want to talk to her. He didn't want to stir up the past. But she had already taken a step toward him. He straightened up, putting on his mask, the cool politeness he used when dealing with difficult clients. Smile, even voice, minimal emotion. I can handle this, he told himself, but inside he knew the conversation was inevitable. Emily stood a few feet away from Michael Crow at the edge of the pool, holding a glass of wine. Her nod, barely perceptible, made him freeze. He nodded briefly, putting on his usual work smile, the one that saved him during meetings with nagging clients. Inside, everything tightened like a spring. 15 years had passed, but her face older, with tired eyes and wrinkles, brought him back to their last argument. He set the empty beer bottle on the edge and shoved his hands in his pockets, not knowing what to expect. Emily took a step closer, then another. Her movements were hesitant, as if she didn't know why she was going. She stopped at the chaise lounge, looked at Michael, and said quietly, I didn't think I'd see you here. Michael shrugged, trying to keep his voice even. Me too, he replied. I came for Tom. I see, she nodded and sat down on the edge of the chaise longue, placing her glass next to her. You look good, Michael. He chuckled, looking at the water in the pool. The lights from the garlands reflected on the surface, creating small glares. Work, travel, he said evasively. You don't age when you're on the move. Emily smiled weakly, fiddling with the hem of her gray sweater. Same old Michael, she said, always in business. He didn't answer, feeling the awkwardness growing. The conversation was stuck like a car in mud. He didn't want to dig into the past, but the silence was unbearable. To say something, he asked, And how are you? Do you live in Chicago? Yeah, she said, looking at her hands. Moved a couple months ago. Tried to, start over. Michael nodded, remembering the billboard on the way here. Start again. He pushed the thought away and asked, Why Chicago? A job, she said. I found a position with a marketing firm. Nothing special, but it pays. What about you? Still in Seattle? Yeah, he replied. I bought an apartment recently. I heard, Emily said, her cheeks turning slightly pink. Lisa mentioned it. Michael frowned. Lisa? He hadn't told Lisa about the apartment. Only Tom and a couple of co-workers. How did Emily know? Lisa? He asked again, squinting. When was this? Well, Emily hesitated. We chat sometimes. She told me that you bought a house, travel a lot. I asked about you. Not often. Michael's jaw tightened. She had been keeping tabs on his life through mutual friends. It was annoying, but he didn't want to make a scene. I see, he said coldly, looking at the pool. Emily was silent, fiddling with her sweater. The music from the house changed to something loud, and the children's squeals at the barbecue grew louder. Michael felt the silence between them pressing, but he didn't know how to break it. Did you help with the party? He asked, changing the subject. Yes, she answered. Lisa asked. I ordered food, helped with decorations. Nothing complicated. I didn't think you were close to her, Michael said. Not close, Emily said, but she's kind. After everything that happened, she didn't turn away. Michael nodded, not going into detail. He didn't want to know what she meant by everything that happened. His mind went back to their last fight, the counseling session. Emily had cried, begged him to stay, and he'd sat there, staring at the floor, saying, I can't. He remembered the text messages he'd found with Nate when he'd hacked her account. Her words about imagining Nate when she was with him. It stung even now. Hey, Michael, a voice called. Tom was walking towards them, holding 2 bottles of beer. Dude, where have you been? Here, Michael replied, turning around. Just breathing. Tom looked at Emily, then at Michael, and his smile wavered slightly. "Oh, Emily, you're here too," he said. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she replied, smiling. "Just chatting." "Cool," Tom said, handing Michael the beer. "Here you go, bro. And don't hide, okay? I want a toast from you later." "Toast?" Michael asked, raising an eyebrow. "Are you serious?" "That's right," Tom laughed. "I'll go check the grill. Emily, don't let him escape." "I'll try," she said, her voice almost playful. Tom left and Michael opened a new bottle. He took a sip, looking at Emily. She looked at him as if she wanted to say something, but she remained silent. "Are you still in cybersecurity?" she asked finally. "Conferences, seminars?" "Yes," he replied. "I was recently in Portland, soon in Seattle." "You always loved it," she said. "I remember you sitting up all night writing code. I was mad that you couldn't sleep." Michael tensed. He didn't want to talk about the past, but she continued. "I didn't realize how important it was to you," she said, looking at the glass. "I thought you were just avoiding me." "Don't, Emily," he said sharply. "It was a long time ago." "I know," she answered quietly. "I just remember." Michael was silent. He remembered their apartment in Seattle, Emily cooking dinner, him working on his laptop. They dreamed of a house, kids, and a dog. It all came crashing down when she confessed about Nate. He squeezed the bottle, feeling the old anger return. "Are you married?" he asked, noticing the ring on her finger. Emily looked at her hand and sighed. "I was," she said. "After us, I married Nate." Michael froze. Nate's name hit him like a fist. He knew she could be with him, but hearing it hurt. "And how?" he asked, trying to sound indifferent. "Bad," she said, looking down. "We had a son, Jake. He's 12. But Nate, he cheated, he lied. He left for another woman when Jake was 5. Michael listened, but his mind was elsewhere. Emily's correspondence with Nate, her lies, her farewell to youth before their wedding. He wanted to ask if it had been worth it, but he held back. "I'm sorry," he said, but his voice was cold. "Thank you," Emily said, ignoring his tone. "I tried to hold it together. For Jake, but it didn't work." "What didn't work?" Michael asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. She paused, fiddling with her sleeve. "Me," she said. "After the divorce, I lost my job. Depression set in. Jake lived with me, but I couldn't cope." Michael looked at her, feeling anger mixed with pity. He didn't want to pity her, but her voice, quiet and broken, touched something inside. "Did you manage?" he asked, looking at the water. "I'm trying," she replied. "But it's hard." He nodded, unsure of what to say. The conversation had been a minefield. Every word could have reopened old wounds. He remembered her crying in counseling, begging him to stay. He had left because he couldn't forgive. Now, looking at her, he wondered if he had done the right thing. "What about you?" Emily asked. "Are you dating anyone?" "No," he answered shortly. "Not mine." "Why?" she asked. You deserve to be happy." "Work, travel," he said, shrugging. "No time." "That's an excuse," she said quietly. "You just don't want to." Michael pressed his lips together. She was right, but he wasn't going to discuss it. Not with her. "Maybe," he said. "And you? After Nate?" "No one," she replied. "I can't. There's too much." He nodded. The guests were dancing on the lawn. The music had become quieter. Michael looked at them, avoiding her gaze. "I heard about your trip to Japan," Emily said. "Lisa said you were in Kyoto. Was it beautiful?" Michael frowned. He hadn't written about Japan on social media. He'd only mentioned it in a work chat. "How do you know?" he asked. "Lisa," she said, embarrassed. "She saw your message. She said you travel a lot." Michael squeezed the bottle. Emily was digging deeper than he thought. It made him angry, but he held back. "Yes, there was," he said, "a year ago." "I always wanted to go there," Emily said, looking at the glass. "But it didn't work out." He didn't answer. Memories of their plans, the trip to Asia, her dreams of Tokyo were creeping into his head. He pushed them away. He looked at her. She was fiddling with the sleeve of her sweater, and then he noticed the scars on her wrist. His stomach clenched. The anger he had been holding inside him mixed with pity. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. Emily sat on a lounge chair by the pool, looking at Michael Crow. The scars on her wrist, barely visible in the dim light, were still there before his eyes. He clutched his beer bottle, feeling anger and pity warring inside him. Her apology, "I'm sorry for everything," hung in the air, but he didn't respond. What could he say? The past was a grave he didn't want to dig up. The music from the house changed to a slow tune, and the chatter of the guests grew quieter. Michael looked out at the water, hoping she wouldn't continue. Emily coughed, fiddling with the hem of her sweater. "So, what are you doing now?" she asked, clearly trying to break the silence. "Still flying to conferences?" Michael shrugged, glad for the change of topic. "Yeah," he said. "Cybersecurity. Was in Portland recently, heading to Seattle soon. The usual routine." "That sounds cool," she said, looking at him. "You were always good at this. I remember you explaining servers to me, and I didn't understand a thing." He chuckled, taking a sip of beer. "You didn't even try," he said, and there was a hint of a smile in his voice. "You said it was boring." "Well, maybe I did," she said, smiling faintly. "But you were on fire with it. It was contagious." Michael glanced at her, but quickly looked away. She sounded sincere, but he didn't want to believe it. Not after everything. He remembered their evenings in Seattle when he'd been at his laptop and she'd been reading magazines, nagging him about working too much. He'd thought they were just different. Now he knew there was more to it. "What about travel?" Emily asked, leaning in a little closer. "You've always loved to travel. Where have you been recently?" "Japan, a year ago," he said. "Italy a couple of years ago. Argentina is coming up." "Japan," she repeated, her eyes brightening. "I heard you were in Kyoto. Is it really as beautiful as they say?" Michael froze, clutching the bottle. He hadn't posted anything about Kyoto on social media. He'd only mentioned it in a work chat with colleagues when discussing a conference in Tokyo. How did she know? "Who told you?" he asked, looking at her. Emily hesitated, looking down. "Lisa," she said. She mentioned that you wrote about Kyoto. Beautiful temples, gardens." "Lisa?" Michael asked, squinting. "I didn't write about Kyoto. Nowhere." "Maybe Tom," she said, clearly embarrassed. "I'm sure I heard it from someone. I don't remember." Michael pressed his lips together. Lisa or Tom could have seen his messages in the private chat, but he doubted it. Emily knew more than she should. He remembered how he had hacked her social media account 15 years ago, using an old password. The correspondence with Nate, her confessions, the secret meetings he had found it all then. And now, was she spying on him? Through his email, his chats, his colleagues? The thought was paranoid, but it wouldn't go away. "It's strange," he said coldly. "I don't share such things." "Sorry," Emily said, fiddling with her sweater. "I didn't mean to. I just heard it and remembered it. I thought it was cool." Michael nodded, but inside he was seething. He didn't trust her. Not after she'd lied to him about Nate for years. He took a sip of beer, trying to calm himself. "And you?" he asked, changing the subject. "What do you do besides work?" "Nothing special," she answered. "I'm living, raising Jake. Well, when I can. He's with his father now, or rather, with his new wife." "Is it difficult?" Michael asked, looking at the water. "Very," she said quietly. "After the divorce, I was lost. But Jake is all I have." Michael nodded, not looking at her. He didn't want to delve into her life, but her voice, full of pain, was catchy. He remembered their wedding, her laughter when they danced, her promises to be together forever, and her betrayal that broke everything. "Hey, Michael," a voice called. Paul, a college acquaintance, was walking toward them with a plate of snacks. "Dude, where are you hiding?" "Here," Michael replied, turning around. "Just relaxing." Paul looked at Emily, then at Michael. "Oh, Emily, hi," he said, munching on chips. "Have you met?" "Yes," she answered, smiling. "Old friends." Michael clenched his jaw, but said nothing. "Friends? Seriously?" "Cool," Paul said, oblivious to the tension. "Michael, come try the wings. Tom fried them himself. They were amazing." "Maybe later," Michael said. "Thank you." "Okay, whatever," Paul shrugged. "Emily, you go too. It's fun there. The dancing has begun." "I'll think about it," she replied, smiling. Paul left, and Michael looked at Emily. She was fiddling with her glass, as if gathering her courage. "He hasn't changed," she said, nodding at Paul. "Still as loud." "Yeah," Michael replied, taking a sip of beer. "Just like college." "I remember you arguing with him about basketball," Emily said, her voice warming. "You always beat him in arguments." Michael tensed. She was reaching into the past again. He didn't want to remember the days when they were together, when she was a part of his life. "Let's not," he said, looking at her. "It was a long time ago." "I know," she said, looking down. "It's just, I often think about that time, about us." Michael squeezed the bottle. He remembered their apartment, her smile, their plans, and her text to Nate, where she wrote that she imagined him when she and Michael were together. The anger flared again. "It's not worth it," he said coldly. "There's nothing to get back." "I'm not trying to take it back," she said quickly. "I just want to explain. With Nate, it wasn't what you think." Michael looked at her, feeling the blood rush to his temples. "Not that?" he asked again. "You dated him behind my back. For years, even before the wedding." Emily turned pale, but did not look away. "It was stupid," she said. "I was young and confused. Nate, he was part of my past. I thought I had to say goodbye to him to be with you completely." "Say goodbye," Michael said, his voice sharpening. "You slept with him before our wedding, and you wrote that you were thinking about him when we—" He trailed off, clenching his fists. Emily hung her head. "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm not forgiven. But I loved you, Michael. I really did." He chuckled, turning away. "Loved?" Her words sounded empty after everything he had learned. "Let's change the subject," he said, looking at the guests. "Tell me about work." "Okay," she said, but her voice was shaking. "I'm in marketing like before. Nothing special. Presentations, advertising." "I don't know," she said. "It's just a job. They pay, and that's it." Michael nodded, not going into detail. He wanted to keep the conversation on safe ground, but Emily brought up the past again. "I often think things could have been different," she said, looking at her glass. "If I hadn't been such an idiot, we could have." "Emily, stop," he interrupted, turning to face her. "This is pointless." "Why?" she asked, pain flashing in her eyes. "You never wanted to talk. You just left." "Because there was nothing to say," he said sharply. "You decided everything for us." She was silent, fiddling with her sweater. Michael took a sip of beer, feeling his anger give way to weariness. He hadn't wanted this fight, but it was pulling him back to that pain. "I always knew you'd go far," Emily said quietly, looking at him. "You were smarter than anyone I knew, and I screwed it all up." Michael froze, feeling a pang of guilt. Her words had touched something inside him, but he didn't want to give in. He looked at her, trying to find the words, but she continued. "I don't blame you for the divorce," she said. "You were right to leave, but I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. Ever." He was silent, looking at the water. Guilt mixed with anger, but he didn't know what to say. Emily sighed and turned back to their marriage. "If I could have explained it to you then," she said. "Nate was mistaken. I thought I had it under control, but—" Michael squeezed the bottle, feeling the tension rising. He wanted to change the subject, talk about anything work, the weather, even the damn barbecue. But Emily stubbornly pulled him back into the past, justifying her actions. Emily sat on a lounge chair by the pool, fiddling with the hem of her sweater. Her words about the past, the excuses about Nate, the admissions of mistakes still echoed in Michael Crow's ears. He stood next to her, clutching a bottle of beer, looking out at the water to avoid meeting her gaze. The tension between them was building like static electricity. He wanted to steer the conversation away from their marriage, but Emily kept returning to what he was trying to forget. "I didn't mean to ruin it," she said quietly, looking at her glass of wine. "I thought I could, I don't know, keep it under control." Michael clenched his jaw but said nothing. He remembered their last fight, not the one at dinner when she confessed about Nate, but the counseling session. Emily had sat across from him, her eyes red from crying, begging, "Give me a chance, Michael." He looked at the floor, repeating, "I can't." Her words had meant nothing then he had seen the messages. He knew about her lies. But now, looking at her, he felt the old wounds bleeding. "Let's not," he said, trying to sound neutral. "It's in the past." Emily nodded, but her fingers continued to fidget with her sweater. "I know," she said. "I just needed to say it right now." He sipped his beer without answering. The music from the house faded, and the hubbub of the guests mingled with the splashing of the pool. Michael tried to focus on something else, on the children running around the barbecue, on the smell of grilling meat. But her presence, her voice, pulled him back. After the divorce, Emily began, her voice breaking. Everything went downhill. Michael looked at her, but didn't interrupt. He didn't want to get into it, but he felt she wouldn't stop. "I tried to be a good mother," she said, looking down. "Jake was everything to me, but I broke." "Broken?" he asked again, trying to keep his voice even. She nodded, fiddling with her sleeve. Michael noticed the scars on her wrist, the thin, white lines he'd seen last time. His stomach clenched, but he didn't show it. "Depression," Emily said quietly. "After Nate left, I lost my job. I couldn't get out of bed. Jake was little, and I couldn't even cook for him." Michael was silent, looking out at the water. He tried to remain neutral, but her words were getting on his nerves. He remembered their counseling sessions, her tears, her promises to change. He hadn't believed her then, thinking she was playing on his pity. Now, listening to her, he wondered if he had seen the whole truth. "I tried treatment," Emily continued. "Pills, therapy. But it was too late. The court took Jake away. His father and his new wife got custody." "You don't see him?" Michael asked, not knowing why. "I see," she answered. "Once a month, under supervision. He hardly wants to talk to me. He thinks I abandoned him." Her voice broke, and she fell silent, looking down at her glass. Michael squeezed the bottle, feeling pity creeping through his defenses. He didn't want this. He didn't want to think about her pain, about her son, about what she had lost. But her words were catching, and he couldn't shake them off. "It's hard," he said finally, without looking at her. "Yes," she said, wiping the corner of her eye. "Sometimes I wish I wasn't here, but then I think of Jake and I try to hold on." Michael tensed. Her words about scars, about dark days, came back to him. He remembered the counselor asking, "Michael, how are you feeling?" He'd answered, "Nothing." He'd been sure he'd been right to leave. But now, looking at Emily, he wondered, could he have done anything differently? If he'd stayed, given her a chance, would she have been different? Would they have the child, the house, the dog they'd dreamed of? "Do you blame yourself?" he asked, not expecting the question. Emily looked at him, her eyes shining. "Every day," she said. "For Jake, for us, for everything." Michael turned away, feeling his insides tighten. He remembered her crying at that consultation, grabbing his hand, begging, "Don't go." He pulled away and walked out without looking back. He'd thought he was protecting himself. Now he wasn't so sure. "Hey, Michael," Tom's voice rang out. He was walking towards them with another bottle of beer. "Dude, are you still here? I thought you were dancing by now." Michael forced a smile. Not my style, he said, raising the bottle. How's the grill? Everything's under control, Tom replied, then looked at Emily. Emily, are you okay? You look, I don't know, sad. It's okay, she said, smiling. Just chatting. Cool, Tom said. Listen, Michael, are you going to make a toast? I'm serious, brother. We're not starting without you. Toast? Michael asked, rolling his eyes. You're not going to leave me alone, are you? No way, Tom laughed. Emily, keep him here, okay? Don't let him escape. I'll try, she replied, and her smile was almost sincere. Tom left, and Emily looked at Michael. He hasn't changed, she said, still as loud. Yeah, Michael said, taking a sip of beer. Just like college. I remember you arguing with him about movies, Emily said, her voice warming. You always convinced him. Michael tensed. She was reaching into the past again. He didn't want to remember the days when they were together, when she was a part of his life. Let's not, he said, looking at the water. I'm sorry, she said quickly. It's just, I often think about what happened, about you. Michael squeezed the bottle. He remembered their apartment, her laughter, their plans, and her texts with Nate, where she wrote that she imagined him when she and Michael were together. The anger flared again. It's not worth it, he said coldly. It's pointless. Maybe for you, she said quietly. But for me, I can't just forget. Michael was silent, looking at the guests. He wanted to leave, but he knew it would look like running away. Emily sighed and continued. I know you hate me for what I did, and I don't blame you. But I want you to know I didn't want to lose you. Emily, stop, he said sharply. I don't want to discuss this. Why? She asked, her voice growing louder. You never let me explain. You just left. Because there was nothing to explain, he replied, turning to her. You said everything with your messages to Nate. She turned pale, but did not look away. It was a mistake, she said. I was young, I was stupid. I thought I could, I don't know, live two lives. But I loved you, Michael. Loved? He asked again, his voice full of sarcasm. Funny. Emily lowered her head, fiddling with her sweater. I know you don't believe it, she said, but it's true. Michael turned away, feeling his anger give way to weariness. He hadn't wanted this fight, but it was pulling him back to that pain. He took a sip of beer, trying to calm himself. Emily, a voice called. Lisa's friend Katie was walking toward them, holding an empty tray. Where have you been? Lisa is asking for help cleaning the kitchen. Emily looked at her, then at Michael. I'm coming, she said, standing up. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, dialed something, and turned to Michael. This is my number. If you're ever in Chicago, call me. I want to hear about your travels. Michael looked at her, but didn't answer. He hadn't promised to call, and she knew it. Emily nodded as if she'd expected it and followed Katie into the house. Michael Crow watched Emily follow Katie toward the house. Her silhouette had disappeared into the crowd of guests, but the number she had left seemed to burn through the screen of her phone. He hadn't promised to call, and she knew it. The conversation with her had left a bitter taste in his mouth, a mixture of anger, pity, and questions he didn't want to answer. The music was loud and the guests were laughing, but Michael felt even more of a stranger. He set his beer down on the edge of the pool and headed into the house. He needed to find Tom and have a few words with him. The living room was full of people. Some were dancing, others were chatting at the refreshment table. Michael made his way through the crowd, nodding to acquaintances but not stopping. The smell of roasting meat and perfume mingled with the warmth of so many bodies. He spotted Lisa pouring drinks, but Emily was not among the guests. Good. He didn't want another meeting. The kitchen was quieter. Tom stood at the sink, stacking dirty dishes in the dishwasher. His shirt was slightly wrinkled and sweat glistened on his forehead. He looked tired but content. Hey, man, Tom said, noticing Michael. Where have you been? I thought you were making toast. Michael leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. Tom, you could have warned me that Emily would be here, he said, trying to keep his voice even, but the irritation was showing through. Tom froze, holding the plate. He placed it in the sink and turned, wiping his hands on a towel. Damn, brother, he said, frowning. Sorry, I didn't think it would be a problem. It's been so many years. Problem, Michael said, looking him in the eye. We just talked. It knocked me out. Tom sighed and leaned against the countertop. Look, I screwed up, he said. Emily was helping Lisa with the party. Food, decorations, everything. Lisa invited her, and I didn't realize you cared. I thought you were over each other a long time ago. Michael clenched his jaw. Forgot? He hadn't forgotten. Not after she'd lied to him for years. But he didn't want to go into details. She moved to Chicago, Tom said, as if reading his mind. Recently, trying to start over after everything she'd been through. After what? Michael asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Tom shrugged, opening the refrigerator and taking out 2 bottles of beer. There are rumors, he said, handing one to Michael. The divorce from Nate, the depression, the problems with her son. Lisa said she was at rock bottom for a long time, but now she seems to be pulling herself up. Work, therapy, all that. Michael took the beer but didn't open it. He remembered the scars on her wrist, her words about dark days. Tom confirmed what she had said, but that didn't make talking to her any easier. I don't want to discuss it, Michael said, looking at the bottle. Let's change the subject. Okay, Tom said, holding up his hands. No problem. It's just, she looked lost when I saw her. Thought you'd want to know. I don't want to, Michael snapped, but his voice was quieter than he expected. Tom nodded, opening his beer. Okay, brother, he said. Then let's talk about old times. Remember how we ordered pizza in the dorm and didn't have any money? We had to borrow some from Paul. Michael chuckled, feeling the tension ease a little. Yeah, he said. And then Paul reminded us for a month that we owed him. Exactly, Tom laughed, slapping the tabletop. Then you beat him at basketball, and he shut up. You were like a machine, man. Not a machine, Michael said, smiling. He was just bragging, and I can't stand braggers. Yeah, right, Tom said, taking a sip of beer. Listen, how's it going in Seattle? Did you really buy an apartment? Lisa told me, but I didn't believe it. True, Michael replied. Nothing special. 2 rooms, view of the bay. I go there a couple of times a month. Cool, Tom said. We should come and visit. I'll take Lisa and the kids. We'll have a barbecue like the good old days. Just without the crowd, Michael said, finally opening his beer. I'm not you, Tom. I don't like noise. I know, Tom laughed. You've always been the guy in the corner with the laptop. But it suits you, bro. This, what's it called? Cybersecurity. You take to it like a duck to water. It's just a job, Michael shrugged. They pay, and that's fine. You're being modest, Tom said, poking him in the shoulder. Lisa said you're a star at some conferences. Presentations, speeches. Am I right? Lisa talks a lot, Michael said, but the corner of his mouth twitched. I'm just doing what I can. That's why I respect you, said Tom, raising the bottle. For old friends, eh? Michael nodded and clinked glasses with him. To old friends, he said, taking a sip. They were silent for a moment, and Michael felt the irritation of seeing Emily recede. Tom always had a way of drawing him out with jokes, beer, memories. He remembered their nights in the dorm, arguing about movies, playing silly pranks. Life had been simpler then. Remember when we got drunk at the bar and sang karaoke? Tom said, grinning. You picked some rock ballad, and everyone laughed. They weren't laughing, Michael said, rolling his eyes. They were shocked by my talent. Yeah, talent, Tom laughed. You were so drunk you dropped the microphone. That's a lie, Michael said, but he smiled. You dropped it when you tried to sing Madonna. Oh, right, Tom said, slapping his forehead. Damn, that was a long time ago. We'll have to do it again, bro. Without Madonna, of course. No karaoke at all, Michael said. I'm too old for that. Old? Tom asked, narrowing his eyes. What are you, 45? You're still a kid, Crow. Find yourself a girl, get married, have kids. You'll have time. Michael tensed, but tried not to show it. Not mine, he said, taking a sip of beer. I'm fine as is. Tom looked at him, and his smile became more serious. Listen, he said, lowering his voice. I'm talking about Emily. Maybe you two should have a real talk? Not just chat by the pool, but, I don't know, figure it out. Michael squeezed the bottle, feeling his irritation return. No, he said sharply. There's no point in analyzing it. Everything was said 15 years ago. Okay, Tom said, holding up his hands. It's just, she looked lost. And you're not thrilled either, I can tell. I'm fine, Michael said, looking at him. And let's not talk about this anymore. Agreed, said Tom, but his gaze was thoughtful. Shall we go into the yard? The toasts will soon begin there. I can't do without you. Give me a minute, Michael said. I'll finish my drink and come. You won't run away? Tom asked, grinning. Not a chance, Michael replied, and Tom laughed. Tom walked out of the kitchen, leaving Michael alone. He finished his beer and set the bottle on the counter. Talking to Tom had relaxed him for a while. Michael Crow left Tom's house as the guests began to leave. The music had faded, the lights over the pool flickered in the dim light, and the air smelled of cold barbecue. He said goodbye to Tom and Lisa, promising to call them again, and got into his rented Toyota. The drive to his hotel in downtown Chicago took half an hour. The city lights flashed past the window, but Michael didn't look at them. His thoughts were on Emily, her scars, her apologies, her phone number, which he hadn't deleted from his screen. He parked outside the hotel, a glass building with a neon sign. The doorman, a guy in his 20s, nodded to him as he walked in. Good evening, sir, he said. Number? Crow, Michael replied, holding out the card. 412. That's right, the porter said, punching in the details. Elevator to the left. Good night. Thank you, Michael said, taking the card and heading toward the elevator. The room was quiet. Standard hotel decor. A bed with white sheets, a desk, a TV on the wall. Michael dropped his bag on the floor and collapsed onto the bed, still wearing his jacket. The ceiling was gray, with barely noticeable cracks. He stared at them, replaying the conversation with Emily. Her voice, quiet and broken, sounded in his head. I'm sorry for everything. Her scars. Her words about depression, about the son she lost. He clenched his fists, feeling anger and pity warring inside him. He stood up, took off his jacket, and tossed it on a chair. He couldn't sleep. Michael turned on the lamp on his desk and opened his bag, taking out his laptop. Work was always a distraction. But instead of code or a presentation, his thoughts returned to their wedding. Emily in a white dress, laughing as they danced to an old song. You're my home, she'd said, clinging to him. He believed her. They'd planned a house in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a dog. A Labrador, just like she'd wanted. Michael closed his eyes, but the images wouldn't go away. Damn, he muttered, opening his eyes. He remembered the night it all fell apart. Dinner at their apartment, her words, I need one last burst of freedom. She confided in him about Nate, her ex, and Michael felt the world fall out from under him. He didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just packed a bag and flew to San Francisco. A week later, he filed for divorce. But the pain didn't go away. He hacked her social media account using an old password. The correspondence with Nate was like a knife. Secret lunches, the weekend before the wedding, her telling him she imagined Nate when she and Michael were together. It broke him. Michael opened his laptop and launched a browser. He didn't know what he was looking for, but his fingers typed in airline websites. He scrolled through flights to Buenos Aires, a trip he'd been planning for months. Dates, prices, seats. It was easier than thinking about Emily. He chose a flight in 2 weeks, entered his card details, and clicked buy. A confirmation came within a minute. That's it, he said out loud, leaning back in his chair. Argentina. New streets, new faces. There will be no Emily, no past. He pulled out his phone and opened the text message with her number. She had sent it when she left to help Lisa. If you're in Chicago, call. He stared at the numbers, feeling the anger return. Call. Why? To hear her apologize again? To dig up what he'd buried 15 years ago? He remembered her scars, her words about her son, about depression. Pity pricked him, but he brushed it aside. She had made her choice then. He had made his. Michael stood up, walked over to the table, and found the napkin he'd stuffed into his pocket at the party. Emily had written her number in pen as they spoke. Her handwriting, small and neat, was the same as the notes they'd written to each other 20 years ago. He clutched the napkin, feeling his pulse pound in his temples. I'm not going back, he whispered, tossing the napkin into the trash can by the table. It landed among the coffee cups and wrappers. He went back to the bed and lay down, staring at the ceiling. His thoughts still revolved around Emily. Her face, aged but familiar. Her voice when she said, I always knew you'd go far. He remembered their last counseling session. She'd cried, begging him to give her a chance. He'd sat there, staring at the floor, repeating, I can't. He'd been sure he was right then. Now, lying in the hotel, he wondered, what if he'd stayed? Would he have been happier? Or would he still be here, alone in his room, with his laptop and a ticket to Argentina? That's enough, he said out loud, sitting up in bed. He turned on the TV to drown out his thoughts. The news was playing in the background, something about the economy, the weather. Michael wasn't listening. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his work chats. A colleague, Sarah, had texted, How was the party? Didn't I get bored? He replied, I survived. I'm flying back tomorrow. It was easier than explaining how he felt. He lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Emily was still in his head, her scars, her words, her number in the trash. He remembered their first meeting in the cafe, her laugh when she spilled coffee on the table. I'm so clumsy, she said, blushing. He had fallen in love then. Now he didn't know what he felt. Anger, pity, or just tired of it all. Michael closed his eyes, trying to imagine Buenos Aires. The streets, the music, the tango. There would be no past, just him and his life, free, without obligations. He whispered, I'm not going back, and finally fell asleep. Michael Crow woke up in his hotel room to the sound of his phone's alarm. It was 7 in the morning, and gray light was filtering through the curtains. He lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, until the events of the night before came flooding back. His conversation with Emily, her scars, her number, which he had thrown in the trash. His sleep had been heavy, fitful, and he felt exhausted. He got up, splashed his face with cold water, and packed his bag. His flight to Seattle was at 2 in the afternoon, which gave him time to drink coffee and clear his head. The hotel lobby was quiet. The doorman, a different guy from yesterday, nodded to him. Good morning, sir, he said. Departure. In about 2 hours, Michael replied. Where's some coffee nearby? Opposite, across the street, said the porter. Cafe Bin. Good place. Thank you, Michael said, throwing his bag over his shoulder. He went outside. Chicago was waking up. Cars honking, people hurrying along the sidewalks, the smell of asphalt mixing with exhaust fumes. Michael found a cafe across the street, small, with wooden tables and a window full of pastries. It was warm inside, smelling of freshly brewed coffee. He ordered a black Americano and sat by the window, looking out onto the street. Your coffee, said the waitress, placing the cup on the table. Anything else? No, thanks, Michael replied, handing over $5. No change. Thank you, she smiled and left. Michael took a sip. The coffee was bitter, strong, just the way he liked it. He looked at the people outside the window. A woman pushing a stroller, a guy with headphones, an old man with a newspaper. The usual morning bustle. But his mind was elsewhere. Emily. Her words from yesterday, I'm sorry. I always knew you'd go far, were in his head. He tried to brush them away, but they clung to him like splinters. He remembered choosing freedom after his divorce. 15 years ago, when their marriage had ended, he'd decided he didn't want any more drama. No relationships, no promises. He'd thrown himself into his work code, servers, conferences. Cybersecurity had become his world, where everything was logical, predictable. Travel Japan, Italy, soon Argentina had given him the illusion of a full life. He told himself that was enough. An apartment in Seattle, empty but his own. Plane tickets. Freedom. Freedom, he muttered, looking into his cup. But at what cost? Solitude was his choice, but sometimes, like now, he felt its weight. He thought of the women he had dated since his divorce. Linda, 3 years ago, had said, "You're like a ghost, Michael. Here, but not quite." She was right. He hadn't let anyone close. Dating a few months, then he'd retreat. Work, traveling, the excuses he repeated to everyone, including himself. It was easier for him that way. No pain, no betrayal. Michael sipped his coffee, looking at the couple at the next table. Young, in their 30s, they were laughing as they shared a croissant. The man adjusted his glasses, the woman poked him in the side, and they both burst into laughter. Michael looked away. He and Emily had once been like this, in a cafe, over coffee, planning the future. He remembered how she had spilled juice on the table on their first date and blushed. "I'm so clumsy," she had said. He had fallen in love then. Now he didn't know what he felt. Enough, he told himself, finishing his coffee. He didn't want to dwell on the past. But talking to Emily had stirred up everything: their wedding, her laughter, their dreams. And her lies, her texts with Nate, her words about imagining him when they were together. It still stung. He stood up, left his cup on the table, and walked out. The cold air hit his face, but Michael decided to take a walk. There was time before his flight, and he didn't want to sit in his room. He walked along the street, looking at the buildings, the storefronts, the people. Chicago was alive, noisy, and it was distracting. He remembered throwing himself into work after the divorce. The first conference in San Francisco, where he flew to so as not to think about Emily. Presentations, client questions, nights spent coding. It saved him. Or did it? "Work," he muttered, turning into the park. "That's all I have." The park was small, with benches wet with morning dew and yellowing trees. Michael walked along the path, his hands in his jacket pockets. He thought about his life, free but empty. After the divorce, he avoided serious relationships like the plague. There were women, but none remained. He didn't want to, or couldn't. Emily had broken something in him, and he didn't know how to fix it. "Michael?" a voice said. He turned around. Lisa's friend Katie was standing by the bench with a paper cup of coffee. "Hello," he said, stopping. "I didn't expect you here." "I'm here every morning," she replied, smiling. "I walk the dog while the kids are at school. What do you do?" "Just taking a walk," Michael said. "I'm flying out in a couple of hours." "Already?" Katie was surprised. "You just got here. Tom will whine that you ran away." "Work," Michael said with a shrug. "Conference in Seattle." "Still a workaholic," Katie said, shaking her head. "Listen, it was great seeing you yesterday. Are you okay? You seemed, I don't know, tense." Michael pressed his lips together. Had she seen him with Emily, or was she just guessing? "It's fine," he replied. "It was just noisy." "I understand," said Katie. "Tom's parties are always too much. Okay, I won't keep you. Say hello to Seattle." "I'll pass it on," Michael said, smiling. Katie left, and he kept walking. Her words, intense, stung. He thought he was good at hiding his emotions, but apparently he wasn't. Talking to Emily had unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He remembered her scars, her words about her son, about depression, and her apology, which he hadn't accepted. Maybe he should have said something. But what? He didn't know. Michael stood by the pond, watching the ducks swim in circles. He thought about his life, the flights, the hotels, the conferences. He liked it. Or had he convinced himself that he liked it? He remembered how, after his divorce, he had decided that being single was the way to go. No commitment, no pain. But yesterday, looking at Emily, he felt like he had missed something. Not her, their dreams, their plans, the life that never happened. He walked on, and his gaze fell on a family on the lawn. A man, a woman, and two children, a boy of about 7 and a girl younger. They were throwing a frisbee, laughing. The boy missed, and the disc flew into the grass. The woman ran after it, and the man picked up the girl, spinning her around. Their laughter echoed through the park. Michael stopped, looking at them. For the first time in a long time, he thought about children. Once he had wanted this, a son or a daughter, with Emily. Now he was 45, and the thought seemed foreign. But looking at this family, he felt a pang not of pain, but of regret. Time to go, he told himself, looking away. He left the park and headed toward the hotel. Chicago was noisy around him, but the walk helped. His head cleared. Michael Crow walked the streets of Chicago, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. His morning stroll through the park had taken his mind off Emily for a moment, but the image of the family with the frisbee was still there. He wasn't used to thinking about his children or what might have been, and it was unsettling. He had 3 hours before his flight to Seattle, and he decided to kill time by wandering around the city. The cold November air was invigorating, and the sounds of the street's cars, voices, footsteps helped drown out the voice inside him that kept telling him about the past. He turned onto a narrow street lined with cafes and shops. The shop windows were filled with signs: flowers, clothes, electronics. Michael stopped at a small bookstore with a wooden door and an open sign. Books had always been his refuge on trips, in hotels, on sleepless nights. He pushed the door open, and the bell above the entrance jingled. The interior smelled of paper and coffee. The shelves reached to the ceiling, piled high with books of all sizes. An older woman behind the counter, wearing glasses and a knitted sweater, looked up from a magazine. "Good morning," she said, smiling. "Looking for something?" "Just looking," Michael replied, nodding. "Thank you." "If anything happens, call me," she said, returning to her journal. Michael walked along the shelves, running his finger along the spines. Novels, biographies, popular science. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, but he stopped at the classics section. His gaze fell on a tattered copy of The Catcher in the Rye. He froze. It was his and Emily's book. They'd read it together when they'd first started dating, in cafes and at his apartment. He'd take it from her hands and read parts out loud, and she'd laugh, saying he read like an actor. Michael pulled the book off the shelf, his heart clenching. "How much?" he asked, approaching the counter. The woman looked at the book, then at him. $5, she said. "Old, but fine." "I'll take it," Michael said, taking out the cash. "Does he like classical music?" she asked, punching in the check. "Sometimes," he replied, taking the book. "Thank you." He walked out of the store, clutching the book. It was colder outside, and he quickened his pace, heading for the nearest park. There, on a bench near an empty playground, he sat down and opened the book. The pages were yellowed, but the text was clear. He flipped through it and suddenly noticed pencil marks in the margins. His handwriting was angular and neat, and hers was small and swirl Y. "Holden is a whiner," he wrote on one page. "You just don't get it," she wrote below, adding a smiley face. Michael froze, feeling his throat tighten. He flipped through the pages. On another page she had written, "I dream of a house by the sea." He had replied, "With a Labrador." She had drawn a dog and added, "And you." Michael had closed the book, looking at the empty space. He had been happy then, 20 years ago. They had been young, in love, full of plans. He remembered them sitting on the sofa, reading this book, her head on his shoulder. "We will be happy," she had said. He had believed her. "Shit," he muttered, opening the book again. Another note, "Tokyo or Paris?" His answer, "Both." They had dreamed of traveling, of a life of adventure. But it had all come crashing down when she'd confessed about Nate. Her lies, her texts, her farewell to youth before the wedding. Michael clutched the book, feeling the anger return. but there was something else behind the anger, a longing for what they'd lost. He pulled out his phone and opened the chat with her number. His fingers hovered over the screen. He could text her. What? I found our book. You were right about Holden. Or just, how are you? He started to type. Emily, but stopped. Why? She had ruined their marriage. Her apology yesterday, her scars, her pain, they weren't his problem. He had left them to protect himself. And he wasn't coming back. No, he said out loud, deleting the message. The screen went blank again, and he shoved the phone into his pocket. Michael looked at the book. Those notes, their jokes, their dreams were like a letter from another life. He didn't want to carry that with him. He didn't want the past to follow him to Seattle, to Argentina, to wherever he went. He stood up, put the book on the bench, and walked away. Someone would find it, maybe read it, maybe leave notes. But for him, it was the end. A symbol of farewell. Michael Crow stepped off the plane at Seattle Airport with a feeling of tiredness in his shoulders. The flight from Chicago had been uneventful, but 4 hours in an aisle seat had not done much to invigorate him. He picked up his suitcase from the carousel and headed for the taxi stand. It was drizzling outside, typical November weather. Michael inhaled the damp air as he climbed into the car and gave the driver the address of his apartment. Better at home than on the road, huh? Asked the driver, an elderly man with gray hair. Sometimes, Michael answered, looking out the window, but I'm used to the road. So you're a traveler, the driver chuckled. Where did you fly? Chicago, Michael said. A friend was celebrating an anniversary. Was it fun? The driver asked as he turned onto the highway. It's noisy, Michael replied, the corner of his mouth twitching. But it's okay. The driver nodded and turned on the radio, leaving him alone. Michael watched the city lights pass by. Chicago was still there, his conversation with Emily, her scars, the book he'd left on the bench. He'd thought letting go would be easier, but her face, her voice, clung to him. He shook his head, clearing the thoughts. Home would be easier. The apartment greeted him with silence. Michael turned on the light and dropped his bag by the door. 2 rooms, minimal furniture, a couch, a table, a bed. The windows overlooked the bay, but now, in the darkness, all he could see was the reflection of a lamp. He went into the kitchen, set up the coffee maker, and opened the refrigerator. Empty, except for a bottle of water and a jar of peanut butter. I need to go to the store, he thought, but waved it off. Tomorrow. Michael unpacked his suitcase, putting his things away, shirts in the closet, his laptop on the table. In the side pocket, he found an envelope, an invitation to a conference in Argentina, which he had slipped in before leaving for Chicago. He opened it, scanning the text. Buenos Aires, cybersecurity, 3 days, speakers from all over the world. He had already booked his flight, but now, holding the invitation, he felt a surge of energy. New place, new faces. Emily wouldn't be there. He pulled out his phone and dialed Sarah, the colleague he'd worked with on the last presentation. She answered on the second ring. Michael, are you alive? She said, her voice full of mockery. I thought you drowned in Chicago beer. Survived, he replied, smiling. Just got back. How are you? Chaos as usual, said Sarah. The clients want a cloud without holes again, but they don't want to pay. How are you? Was the party a success? It's noisy, Michael said, sitting down on the sofa. But Tom is happy, and that's the main thing. Is Tom your friend who sang Madonna at karaoke? She asked. That's him, Michael said, and they both laughed. Cool, Sarah said. Are you okay? You don't seem particularly cheerful. Michael paused, looking at the invitation in his hand. He wasn't used to sharing personal information, but Sarah was one of the few people he could talk to about more than just work. I met my ex-wife, he said finally, unexpectedly. Wow, Sarah said, her voice growing serious. That's awkward, I guess. How did it go? Bad, Michael replied. We talked. Everything's complicated for her. Divorce, son, depression, and I don't know how I feel. Damn, Sarah said. It's like meeting a ghost. Are you coping? I'm trying, Michael said. She apologized, talked about the past, but I don't want to stir it up. And rightly so, Sarah said. Look, Michael, you don't have to carry her baggage. She made her choice then, you made yours. Let her go. Live your life. Michael nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Yeah, I know, he said. It's just hard to get out of my head. I understand, Sarah said. But you're Michael Crow, master of cybersecurity and presentation king. You've got Argentina ahead of you, new horizons. Don't get stuck in the past. The king of presentations, Michael chuckled. You're overdoing it. Not a bit, she laughed. Seriously, focus on Buenos Aires. Dance the tango there, find yourself a hot Argentine. Don't start, Michael said, but he smiled. Tango is not my thing. Okay, said Sarah, but have you already bought a ticket? Yes, yesterday, he answered. In 2 weeks. Great, she said. Then get ready for the conference. And Michael, if anything happens, call me. Don't keep it all to yourself, as usual. It's a deal, he said. Thank you, Sarah. You're welcome, she replied and hung up. Michael put his phone down on the table and looked at the invitation. Argentina. He imagined the streets of Buenos Aires, the music, the crowds. This was what he needed: movement forward, away from Emily, her words, her scars. He stood up, opened his laptop, and began searching for information about the conference. The schedule, the speakers, the topics. Work was always his anchor. He added notes about the talk he was going to give and booked a hotel in the city center. When he finished, he walked around the apartment, feeling the tension ease. It was bare but cozy, his space, his rules. He stopped at the living room wall, where there was only one painting, abstract lines he'd bought on the advice of a realtor. Too bare, the realtor said. Michael opened a closet and found an old-world map he'd bought a year ago but never hung. He pulled it out, unfolded it, and tacked it to the wall. The map was large, with the continents in bright colors. Michael picked up a marker and put a dot on Buenos Aires. Argentina, a new horizon. He stepped back, looking at the map. Japan, Italy, and now Argentina. His life was dots on a map, each one taking him further from the past. Michael Crow sat at the desk in his Seattle apartment, staring at his laptop screen. Morning light flooded the room, reflecting off the bay window. The coffee maker hissed, filling the air with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He'd just finished proofreading a presentation for a conference in Argentina, but his mind kept drifting back to Chicago. It had been a week since Tom's anniversary, and the conversation with Emily was still haunting him. He tried to distract himself: work, travel plans, even a world map on the wall with a dot in Buenos Aires. But her face, her scars, her words clung to him. His phone beeped, signaling a new email. Michael opened it, a message from Tom with the subject line, "Anniversary Photos." He chuckled, expecting to see drunken selfies or pictures of kids running around a pool. Tom wrote, "Dude, here are a couple pics. Thanks for coming. Call me when you're in Chicago." Michael downloaded the attachments, a dozen photos. Tom and Lisa at the grill, guests with drinks, kids in rubber rings. He flipped through them, smiling when he saw a picture of Tom trying to dance. Same clown, he muttered. But the last photograph stopped him in his tracks. It was of him and Emily by the pool. The shot had caught them in the middle of a conversation. Michael standing, looking away, holding a bottle of beer, and Emily sitting on a lounge chair, her face turned toward him. Her gaze, a mixture of longing and warmth, was fixed on him. Michael felt his throat tighten. He hadn't noticed it then, in the noise of the party, but now, in the photo, her emotions were obvious. She was looking at him as if he were the only person in the world. "Damn," he said out loud, leaning back in his chair. He zoomed in on the photo, studying her face. There were lines around her eyes, a tired look, but something about her expression reminded him of the Emily he'd known 20 years ago. He remembered her words at the party, "You deserve to be happy." He'd waved them off then, but now they sounded different, less like an apology, more like a sincere desire. Michael closed his laptop, trying to push the thoughts away, but they wouldn't go away. He stood up, poured coffee, and returned to the table. The photo was still open on the screen. He remembered their wedding, her white dress, her laughter as they danced, their dreams of a house, children, a dog, and her betrayal, her texts with Nate, her lies. Anger flared, but quickly faded. He was tired of being angry, tired of holding it in. Emily was a part of his past, but this picture, her look, made her real, alive, here and now. "What are you doing, Emily?" he muttered, looking at the photo. He pulled out his phone, opened the browser, and typed her name into a search engine. Social media was the first thing that came to mind. He hadn't checked her accounts since he'd hacked them 15 years ago. That was when he'd found the text messages with Nate that had broken their marriage. Now he just wanted to know how she was doing. Maybe she really was starting over, like Tom said. Maybe she was happy. Or maybe she wasn't. He found her old profile on one of the social networks, but the page was empty. "Account deleted," it read. Michael frowned and tried another platform. Same thing. No trace, no photos, no posts, no updates. He put his phone down, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Why had she disappeared? Because of the depression she'd talked about? Because of her son? Or did she just want to erase the past like he'd tried? "Maybe it's for the best," he said out loud, but he wasn't sure. He looked back at the photo. Her gaze, longing, warm, was piercing his defenses. He remembered her sitting by the pool, fiddling with her sweater, talking about her son, the scars, the pain. He hadn't wanted to listen then, but now her words echoed in his head. "I always knew you'd go far. You deserve to be happy." Michael clenched his fists, feeling old wounds opening. He didn't want to think about her fate, but he couldn't stop. "Hey, Michael, are you home?" came the voice from the phone. He accidentally pressed the call from Sarah, his colleague, and turned on the speakerphone. "Yes," he replied, quickly folding the photo. "Just got back. What's on you?" "The clients are acting up again," Sarah said, her voice full of irritation. "They want an audit in a week. Are you ready for battle?" "Always," Michael said, forcing a smile. "The parts have arrived. I'll take a look." "Already," she said. "And how are you? Chicago hasn't broken you." Michael paused, looking at the screen where the edge of the photo was still visible. "Almost," he said. "Meeting my ex, it was unexpected." "Oh," Sarah said. "You said that, didn't you? So, did you figure it out?" "No," he replied. She's got it complicated, and I don't want to get involved in it." "That's right," Sarah said. "Listen, Michael, don't get stuck there. You've got Argentina ahead of you, your job, your life. She's in the past. Leave her there." "I'm trying," he said, his gaze falling again on the photo. "Try harder," Sarah said, and he heard the smile in her voice. "Okay, I won't bore you. Check your email and call if anything happens." "Agreed," Michael said, hanging up. Michael Crow sat at his desk in his Seattle apartment, surrounded by printouts and open tabs on his laptop. A world map on the wall, with Buenos Aires marked, was a reminder of the upcoming trip. A conference in Argentina was a week away, and he was immersed in preparation. Lists lay on the table, directions around the city, restaurant addresses, a schedule of talks. His coffee, now cold, sat next to a notebook where he had jotted down a few phrases in Spanish. "Gracias, a donde está?" Michael liked to be prepared, and this trip was no exception. He opened a website with information about Buenos Aires, streets full of music, tango cafes, antique markets. He read about the culture of Argentina, the passion for soccer, the tradition of drinking mate, the nightly milongas where tango was danced. Michael had never danced, but the idea of trying was intriguing. He found a tango studio in Seattle, not far from home, and signed up for a trial lesson. Why not, he thought, closing his laptop. It wasn't about romance, but about respect for local traditions. That morning, he booked a hotel in central Buenos Aires, a small one with a view of the plaza. He checked flights, added conference meetings with colleagues to his calendar, and downloaded a city guide. Work had always been his anchor, but this time he felt something new, anticipation. Argentina felt like more than just another dot on the map, a chance to shake things up after Chicago, after Emily. That evening, Michael went to a Tango studio. The building was old, with brick walls and a sign that said Tango Seattle. The interior smelled of wood and varnish. A group of 10 people, mostly middle-aged couples, stood against a mirrored wall, listening to an instructor. Michael walked in, feeling out of place. His jeans and gray shirt contrasted with the women's dresses and the men's tailored trousers. "New guy?" asked the instructor, a woman in her 50s with short black hair. "Name?" "Michael," he replied, putting his hands in his pockets. "I signed up this morning." "Great," she said, smiling. "I'm Laura. We don't have a partner yet, but we'll find one. Take the corner." Michael nodded and stood against the wall, watching. Laura turned on some music, slow, with accordion and violins. The couples began to move, and Michael felt even more of a stranger. He had never danced, except at drunken college parties. But something about the music, the rhythm, made him stay. "Hey, are you Michael?" a voice said nearby. He turned around. A woman in her 40s, with chestnut-colored hair pulled back into a ponytail, stood next to him. Her black dress was simple but elegant, and her eyes sparkled with interest. "Yes," he answered, slightly wary. "And you?" "Maria," she said, holding out her hand. "Laura said we're a couple for tonight. Do you mind?" "No," Michael said, shaking her hand. "But I warn you, I'm new." "It's okay," she laughed. "I'm not a pro either. I just love tango. Why did you come?" "I'm going to Argentina," Michael said. "I want to understand what this dance is." "Oh, Buenos Aires," Maria said, her eyes lighting up. "Cool. I was there 2 years ago. The city is on fire. Are you going to the Milonga?" "Milonga?" he asked again, frowning. "Dance parties," she explained. "Everyone dances tango there, from beginners to old men. The atmosphere is incredible." "We'll see," Michael said, shrugging. "I'm more into conferences." "Serious guy," Maria winked. "Okay, let's study. Laura is already watching." Laura clapped her hands, calling everyone's attention. "The basic step," she said, demonstrating. "Men lead. Women follow. Michael, Maria, try it." Michael stepped forward awkwardly, holding Maria's hand. She moved easily, whispering left, "Don't rush." He tried, but he felt wooden. Maria didn't laugh, but patiently corrected him. "Not bad for a first try," she said when the music stopped. "You can do it." "I doubt it," Michael said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But thanks." They moved to the wall while Laura explained the next step. Michael looked at Maria. She was open, lively, not at all like the people he usually interacted with. Her enthusiasm reminded him of Tom, but without the volume. "Do you dance often?" he asked to fill the pause. "Once a week," she replied. "It's like therapy." "What about you? What do you do besides conferences?" "Working, driving," he said. "Cybersecurity, not much fun." "Sounds cool," said Maria. "And the travel? You mentioned Argentina. Where else have you been?" "Japan, Italy," he replied. "I love new places. They're distracting." "Oh, I know," she nodded. "Traveling is a way to find yourself. Every city teaches you something new." Michael looked at her, feeling her words strike a chord. Find yourself? He'd never thought of it that way. For him, traveling was work, a routine, a way to avoid being stuck in one place. But her enthusiasm was infectious. "Maybe," he said with a shrug, "we'll see what Argentina teaches us." "If you learn tango, that's already a victory," Maria laughed. "Listen, if you're ever in Buenos Aires, go to a milonga at La Verada. There's real tango there." "I'll remember that," Michael said, smiling. "Thanks for the advice." Laura called everyone back onto the floor, and they continued. Michael moved a little more confidently, but still faltered. Maria, instead of getting irritated, encouraged him. By the end of the lesson, he felt less awkward. "Not bad, Michael," Laura said, coming over. "Will you come back?" "Maybe," he replied, "if I don't break my legs." "You won't break it," Maria laughed. "You learn quickly." After class, they went outside. The cold air hit their faces, but Michael felt more cheerful. Maria took out her phone. "Let's exchange contacts," she said. "If you're in Argentina and decide to dance, write to me. I'll suggest places." "Okay," Michael said, taking out his phone. He entered her number, but kept his distance. She was friendly, but he wasn't looking for new ones, connections. Not after Emily, not after everything. "Good luck in Argentina," Maria said, buttoning her jacket. "And remember, travel is a way to find yourself." Michael nodded, feeling her words sink in. He said goodbye and went home, thinking about Buenos Aires, Tango, and how maybe he really was looking for something more than just a new dot on the map. Michael Crow walked into the Seattle Tango studio feeling a little more confident than he had the week before. It was drizzling outside, but it was warm inside, and the smell of wood floors mingled with the faint aroma of coffee. A mirrored wall reflected a group of 12 people getting ready for class. Michael took off his jacket, hung it on a hook, and looked around the room. He returned for his second tango class, deciding that since he was going to Argentina, he might as well learn the basics. Besides, after his first lesson with Maria, dancing no longer seemed so intimidating. Laura, the instructor, stood at the tape recorder, adjusting the music, her short black hair shining under the lights. "Michael, you're back," she said, smiling. "You didn't run away after the first time?" "I'm holding on for now," he replied, smiling slightly. "But there are no guarantees." "Well done," said Laura, the same partner. "Maria is already here." Michael nodded and spotted Maria against the wall. She was standing in a black top and jeans, fixing her hair. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Hey, Michael," she said, coming up. "I didn't expect you to come back. Are you planning on becoming a tango star?" "More likely not to embarrass myself in Argentina," he replied, shrugging his shoulders. "How are you?" "Great," Maria said, smiling. "And you, ready for Buenos Aires?" "Almost," Michael said. "Tickets, hotel, report. All that's left is to not fail at the Milonga." "You won't fail," she laughed. "You're already better than last time. Let's go, shall we begin?" Laura clapped her hands, calling everyone's attention. "We're practicing turns today," she said. "Men, lead confidently. Women, trust your partner. Michael, Maria, go ahead." Michael took Maria's hand, feeling a little less wooden than he had the previous lesson. The music slow, with deep accordion notes, filled the room. He stepped forward, trying to remember the steps Laura had demonstrated. Maria moved easily, whispering prompts. "Relax your shoulders. Look at me." Michael concentrated, and by the end of the first tune, he hadn't even missed a beat. "Progress," Maria said when the music stopped. "A couple more lessons, and you're ready for the Milonga." "Don't flatter yourself," Michael said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I'm still like a robot." "Cute robot," she winked, and Michael chuckled, looking away. They moved toward the wall while Laura explained the next step. Michael looked at Maria. Her openness, her ease of communication was new. After Chicago, after Emily, he was used to keeping people at a distance. But Maria was easier to talk to than he expected. "Are you always so alive?" he asked, to fill the pause. Maria laughed, adjusting her tail. "Not always," she said, "but tango helps. And traveling. It's like a reboot. And you look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Michael shrugged, looking at the parquet floor. "Work travel," he said. "I'm used to it." "That's not an answer," Maria said, squinting. "What's going on in your head, Michael? You don't look like the kind of guy who just works and flies." He paused, feeling her question tug at something inside him. He wasn't used to sharing personal things, but Maria looked at him with genuine interest, without judgment. After talking to Sarah about Chicago, He realized that keeping everything inside was harder than it seemed. I was in Chicago recently, he said, looking at his sneakers. Met my ex-wife. Didn't expect that. Maria nodded without interrupting. And how? She asked quietly. It's weird, he said. We got divorced 15 years ago. She did some bad things back then. Lied, dated someone else. I left. And now she's out there with all these problems, and I don't know how I feel. He was surprised at how easily the words came out. Usually he spoke of Emily with anger, but now his voice was even almost calm. Maria looked at him, fiddling with the bracelet on her wrist. It's like a ghost from the past, isn't it? She said. I had that too. Not a divorce, but a loss. Michael looked at her, waiting for her to continue. My brother, Maria said, looking down. He died 3 years ago. An accident. We were close. After that, I was kind of stuck. Tango and traveling pulled me out. They reminded me that life goes on. I'm so sorry, Michael said, feeling her words sink into his chest. It's hard. Yes, she nodded. But you know what I realized? You can't live in the past. It's like an anchor pulling you back. You have to move forward, even if it's scary. Michael nodded, feeling her words resonate. He thought of Emily, of her scars, of the photo he had saved. The past was tugging at him, but he didn't want to be stuck. Argentina, the tango, this studio, all of this was a step forward. You're right, he said. I'm trying, but sometimes it won't let go. I understand, Maria said, smiling. That's why we're here, dancing. It helps. Laura called everyone back onto the dance floor. Michael and Maria returned to the dance. He led her, trying not to stray, and for the first time he felt the rhythm. Maria smiled, following his steps, and Michael found himself smiling back. The music, her lightness, her words, all of it created a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. Lightness. That's better, said Laura, passing by. Michael, relax, and it will be on fire. I try, he answered, and Maria laughed. After class, they went outside. The rain had stopped, and the air was fresh. Maria zipped up her jacket, looking at him. You're great, she said. You're back and dancing. You'll be a star in Argentina. Don't exaggerate, Michael said, but he smiled. Thank you for the partnership. You're welcome, she replied. Will you write from Buenos Aires? Tell me how the Milonga is. Maybe, Michael said, feeling he didn't want to promise. He was ready to open up to the world, but he wasn't in a hurry. Not after Emily, not after everything. Keep your distance, okay? Maria said, squinting. Okay, I'm not insisting, but tango suits you. We'll see, Michael said, and they said goodbye. He walked home feeling like his conversation with Maria had changed something inside him. For the first time, he was talking about divorce without anger, and it was liberating. Michael Crow stepped out of the Buenos Aires airport, squinting in the bright sun. The heat hit him in the face, mixed with the smell of asphalt and flowers. Taxi drivers shouted rides, and a crowd of tourists and locals buzzed around him. He took a deep breath, feeling the fatigue of the 10-hour flight recede. Argentina, a new dot on his map. Michael adjusted his bag on his shoulder and headed for a taxi. Where to, sir? Asked the driver, a man with a thick mustache, opening the trunk. Downtown Plaza Hotel, Michael answered, getting into the back seat. Bruno, the driver nodded, turning on the radio. A tango began to play, slow, with a drawn-out violin. Michael looked out the window as the car drove down the highway. Buenos Aires spread out before him. Wide avenues, old stucco buildings, sidewalk cafes with brightly colored umbrellas. People walked along the sidewalks, some in a hurry, some drinking mate as they walked. The city was alive, pulsating, and Michael felt its energy contagious. He remembered Maria's words. Travel is a way to find yourself. Maybe she was right. At the hotel, he dropped his bag in his room, small but cozy, with a window overlooking the square, and went out for a walk. The conference started tomorrow, and today he wanted to see the city. He walked along Florida Street, full of shops and street musicians. A guitarist played a tune Michael didn't know, and a couple of tourists filmed him on their phones. Michael dropped a coin into his guitar case and walked on. In Plaza San Martin, he paused, looking at the statue of the general on horseback. Children ran around, old people sat on benches, and couples took pictures. Michael pulled out his phone and took a picture, not for social media, but for himself. He remembered Chicago, meeting Emily, the look in her eyes in that pool photo. He had felt anger, pity, guilt. Now, standing in the Argentine sun, he felt something else. Peace. "This is forward," he muttered, putting the phone away. He walked into a cafe on the corner of the square. Wooden tables, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, a waiter humming under his breath. Michael ordered an espresso and steak and potatoes, the classics the guidebook recommended. "First time in Argentina?" the waiter asked, setting down the plate. "Yes," Michael replied. "What would you recommend watching?" "Milonga, Center," the waiter said, smiling. "Tango is the soul of Buenos Aires. Go to La Verada, you won't regret it." "Thanks," Michael said, remembering that Maria had said the same thing. "Maybe I'll go." The waiter nodded and left. Michael ate, looking out over the square. The steak was juicy, the coffee strong. He pulled out the small notebook he always took with him when he traveled and began jotting down his impressions. Buenos Aires is loud but alive. The streets are like an old movie. People take their time. Tango is everywhere. He paused, thinking. Emily came back to him, not her scars or her apologies, but her words. "You deserve to be happy." He had dismissed her at the time, but now he realized she had been right, and, strangely, her coming to Chicago had helped him. She had closed an old chapter he had been afraid to touch. "Thank you, Emily," he muttered, finishing. "The past is let go. Forward." That evening he returned to the cafe, another one, closer to the river. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Michael ordered a glass of red wine and opened his notebook again. He wrote, "The sunset here is a promise. The city says live." He smiled, feeling something inside him let go. Emily, her pain, his anger, all of that was left behind in Chicago. Here in Buenos Aires, he was just Michael, a man starting over. He pulled out his phone and chatted with Maria. Her words about traveling, her ease in tango lessons inspired him. He typed a message. "Hi, I'm in Buenos Aires. The city is amazing. When I get back, let's have coffee." He sent it without thinking and put the phone away. It wasn't a promise of romance, but a step forward. He was ready to open up slowly, but sincerely. Michael watched the sunset as he finished his wine. The city was humming around him. Laughter, music, voices. He felt part of it, not a stranger, like at Tom's party, Booth Eyes. He whispered, "I'm home," looking at the city, and smiled. Hope, warm and quiet, settled in his chest. What would happen next? A conference, tango, coffee with Maria, he didn't know. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't scare him. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.